let's get straight to our next guest, Conservative peer and long-time friend of the show, Lord Craig McKinley. Very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you so much. So much to talk about. I'm just going to go straight in there on the Tories. Should there be some sort of deal between the Tories and Reform ahead of the next election, or are we going to be stuck with this bunch of complete useless lunatics who are currently running our country? We've got, people think that women can have a penis, that think that, we can have a successful booming economy by having the highest energy costs in the world, and you name everything. Oh yeah, and have pretty much open borders but pretend to be strict on them. The only way they're getting out of power is if Reform and Tories have a pact. Should they do that?
There's a long way to go yet, Julia. We've got 4.5 years of this diabolical socialist Labour government, and I think that will concentrate minds. I mean, just go back to July the 4th when we had that election. The morning after, it was apparent that both Conservative vote, Reform vote was very substantial. And it was more than enough to have quashed any Labour vote, and we wouldn't have had the supermajority by Labour. Now, that was bad enough the morning after the night before, but we've now been living through 6 months of a Labour government, and it is even more horrific and horrendous than any of us even considered on July the 5th. It is truly bad. It is pursuing this mad energy policy. It is prepared to give away British territory of the Chagos Islands, and not just for nothing, but with a huge dowry attached to it. We've taken away those the winter fuel allowance. And, I could go on and on and on, and prepared to destroy our farming. So what do we do about that? We cannot have another situation where the right of centre vote is split. That does not do any of us any good. Now, we created that vacuum for ourselves. It was because of the Conservative Party. We weren't great in that last period of government. I'm the first one to say that, and I was even saying it during that period. We weren't good on immigration. Let's be very honest and be very diplomatic. It was an absolute disaster. The high taxes, well, of course, that was on the back of COVID, and I don't need to tell you, Julia, I was rather dismissive of the whole COVID proposal.
I mean, mate, you were on the right side of virtually every debate.
Well, I know I will be on net zero. It might take a little while before the lights go out to make people realise that I'm right. But anyway, let's get back to the matter in hand. Generally, I mean, obviously, Reform does get attractiveness to some ex-Labour voters, traditional Labour voters who've simply had enough of the woke. They're patriotic to the core. They're decent people, and they're the people actually that made the first step away from their old Labour voting habits that they probably had for a long time. They went to UKIP or Brexit Party during those European elections, and then they took the step to come to us in 2019 and gave us that very big majority.
Yeah.
We didn't thank them enough for that vote, and they're now back out in the wilderness, and many of them are voting for Reform. But we have to face the fact that a lot of our voters, Conservative voters, probably more actually, have gone to Reform. So that right of centre vote must never be broken up again, because we've seen what it
Yeah, but do you deserve the votes, or does Reform deserve the votes? Because I think there's an awful lot of people that never leave the Tories. A lot of people in Reform never leave Reform. If the vote is split, the vote is split. Kemi Badenoch, whoever is leader, Nigel Farage, whoever is leader of Reform, if they will not do a deal, the vote is split, the votes can cancel each other out. Even if it's not a formal coalition, just sort of, we'll stand by, like the Brexit Party Nigel Farage did for Boris Johnson. Tories wouldn't have had an 80-strong majority if Boris Johnson had stood aside in lots of seats.
I know that very much.
Yeah, unless there is some sort of unofficial or official deal, Labour are going to win a big majority at the next election. Whose fault is that going to be?
I think another 4 years of this complete farrago that we're seeing in Westminster.
Well, then wouldn't a deal, for a lot of people might say, well, wouldn't any deal where even if you get, say, 50% of the stuff you want, wouldn't that be better than having Labour in for you guys?
Well, it would for me, obviously, Julia. I mean, I've been in politics to deliver the best for this country, and I'll do whatever is necessary for that. I happen to believe that the Conservative Party has been the best vessel for that. It didn't have the greatest last period in government. The first armed up for that one. But we are still the Conservative Party. If we can show that we have those values that we always had as a Conservative Party, and I think Kemi Badenoch is one to show that leg to the electorate, and I think we'll see more of that over the years to come, then perhaps that void will be filled, and many of our voters that went to Reform will come back to us. But I want this job done, that we get a decent type of smaller state politics, we get net zero back where it should be, we get a grip again on immigration, and have these debates without being shouted at as racist. I think that is what the nation wants. then that has got to be all to the good.
That would be so. Let me raise a couple of the immigration stories that are around today. We had, absurd situation, yesterday, of a case where someone wasn't deported because of his son wouldn't like foreign chicken nuggets. I mean, genuinely, there is an appeal going on, but the fact that even these things, it was only one of the reasons, but the fact these things are even mentioned and not laughed out of the tribunal is amazing. Today we've got two more. We've got a Pakistani father who was jailed for child sex offences. He basically tried to engage in sex with three barely pubescent girls, we're told by the court. He was jailed for 18 months. I wonder why it was so short, frankly. But he's got two toddlers. And basically, a lower tribunal judge ruled he shouldn't be deported back to Pakistan because it would be unduly harsh for the children to be without their father. He's not allowed to live with them because he's a paedophile. He has to have only supervised contact. We've also got an extraordinary situation. A woman from Grenada, Lynthia Calise, she arrived in the UK as a visitor with her son back in 2018, 6-month visa, but carried on living here in the UK. When they tried to remove her, she basically said, but I'm married to a Latvian driver, a Latvian forklift driver who has permanent settled status here in the UK, and under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights have got a right to a family life. The courts quite rightly said to her, well, your husband can go back to Grenada with you. Her response was he wouldn't like Caribbean food and would struggle with the heat. I mean, this is the madness we are in right now. And all of this happened while the Tories were in power.
Well, I think what we're seeing is the ECHR. I was always prepared to give it the benefit of the doubt. It was started after the remnants of the Second World War for good reason. Yeah. But it's become a lawfare, an evolving lawfare of itself. I don't respect it. You don't respect it. And I bet if you were to go to the Red Lion or any other pub around the country, the people in there do not respect it either. I think the time has come that we say, I'm sorry, ECHR, you've gone too far. We don't respect you anymore. The nonsense has gone beyond the realms of even anything logical. It's time we left it. But you're quite right. The arguments that are put forward, usually under ECHR type dynamics of people staying in the country, whether they're hateful criminals that we really want to see the back of, the Pakistani man particularly. But we've got a problem. We've got an international problem that many of these the foreign states will not take their own criminals back. Yeah. Now, I suggest we take a bit of a leaf out of Donald Trump.
I was just going to suggest.
And we start using our muscularity that we do have. We actually say to countries like Pakistan that I know do not like taking back their own criminals. Now, I can see why they don't want them, but, hard luck. Yep. Well, we're going to stop the flow of aid immediately unless you take your own criminals back, and we stop issuing visas for your students and for people to visit family in the UK. It stops now unless you start doing the right thing and take your criminals back.
I'm all in favour of a bit of that muscle.
That's not tough. That's not nasty. That is common sense. We need to get
perfectly reasonable. Just finally, I want to ask you, we're going to talk to a guest about this in a few moments, but a new study has shown absolutely shocking figures here. Half of Gen Z, they're sort of 18 to 27-year-olds, so basically young adults. Half of young adults in Britain basically believe that this country is racist, and just 1 in 10 said be willing to fight for Britain in a war. Why do you think that is?
Well, it just shows what they've been being taught for all these years. They've been taught that, the British past, which I think has got a great deal to credit it, bringing democracy to the world, order, all of those good things that many nations still enjoy today, was brought by the British Empire. There was some bad in it, of course, but there was an awful lot of good. But they only get taught the bad, they don't get taught the good. I've spoken to youngsters, and you talk about Trafalgar Day, 1805, the great victory of Nelson, and they don't even know who Nelson is.
It's
so
terrifying.
we've got an inculcated problem with education, and I won't even start on what they're being taught on net zero. It is absolutely shocking.
Listen, we've got a new natural history museum, whole big display, and apparently it's all about how we have to save our planet. I mean, just more absolute, just more of this kind of ideology.
But I do worry about new education bills under this new Labour government.
That said,
this rubbish even worse.
You're not in charge in do anything about it a lot of that time. Lord McKinney, we'll have to leave it there. Always so good to talk to you because I have to appear, Lord McKinney. Very brief word from Tom Slater on that.
The net zero education stuff.
It's terrifying.
This is not the sort of thing you'd expect in a liberal. The fact we're kind of
propaganda.
propagandising our own children to support government policy.
But also, all these people, all these kids, literally, these young people going like, the Earth is going to die. I mean, literally, stuff that is just not scientifically based at all. The hysteria. I mean, I'm sorry. I can excuse it in Greta Thunberg. David Attenborough. Sorry, he should be ashamed of himself. He's gone from being hero to zero. Quite literally for me. 12:49 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Connor Tomlinson about Gen Z. Why do they think our country is racist and why wouldn't they fight for it? Maybe those two things are related.